Well, if recent history is anything to go by, then the Cleveland Browns should win this game. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, the Cleveland Browns versus the arch nemesis, Baltimore Ravens, number 2 on my list of most hated teams behind only the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sure that's the same for a lot of Browns fans out there, but do let me know if you do rank them any different than I do. I'll be honest, I've had an awful week with work. I'm ill, and I've now got to watch my 2-7 football team go and play a Baltimore Ravens team that has just won 3 games on the trot and is looking to, of course, turn their season around. They're only 1 game out from the Steelers. You know, a Steelers loss this weekend and a Ravens win, and you know this division is completely flipped on its head. So they are going to be gunning for this one for sure. A Ravens team that is going to be trying very hard to win, going up against a Browns team that, if we're being completely honest, I'm not entirely sure we can say with all certainty that they are 100% trying to win. So I'm excited to see how this one goes, I suppose. But as I said in the intro, you know, the Browns have split this series. Each of the last 3 seasons. Even last year, only winning 3 games. One of them was against the Ravens, and one of them was against the Steelers. You know, I did say a couple of weeks ago that if we are only going to win 2 more games, then the Ravens and the Steelers game, that will do it for me. But obviously, you know, as I said, you know, they've split the series the last 3 years. If history is anything to go off, the Browns should win this game. But will they win this game? I'm not so sure. As I said, the Browns are 2-7. They are not a good football team. I think anyone trying to argue that this at this point is a good football team that is struggling, I don't even know what to tell them. I don't think anyone is saying that, so I wouldn't be saying it to many people. This is a bad football team. We all know it. I don't think they're going to be getting much better this year. Just with obviously the current players on the roster, the current situation, the current circumstances with the team and the issues that they have and continue to persist. It's not like one week this team is just suddenly going to stop sucking. So the Browns suck. We all know that. The Ravens, you know, a few weeks ago, you know, a month ago, you could have said the Ravens suck. Anyone with a 1-5 record sucks. But we all knew that 1-5 record wasn't exactly truly reflective of them and how their season would end up being. I actually picked the Ravens to dog walk this division before the year. I thought this would be one of the most out of reach AFC Norths that we've seen in the last few years. I really thought they were going to run away with it, and I still think that would have been the case if their entire team didn't get injured, including Lamar Jackson. But obviously, so as I said, you know, that 1-5 start wasn't truly reflective on them as a team. It was more so obviously all the injuries that they had and the struggles that they had early. And now obviously, as they've started to get a little bit healthier, you know, the wins have started to pick up again. I mean, even at 1-5, I'm pretty sure they were still favoured to win the division, even with the Steelers at like 4-1, 4-2, just because everyone knew, you know, this wasn't because they were a bad team. It was because of the injuries, the unlucky stuff, all of that stuff that kind of went into it. And that as soon as those players came back, looking at their schedule, how many easy games were on that schedule, it was going to be somewhat easy for them to get their season back on track. And that is, of course, what they have done. They now sit at 4-5. They have a chance this week to get to 500 for what I think is the first time this season, obviously with a win against the Browns. So we got a good football team going up against a bad football team. Usually it's pretty easy to figure out how this one goes. And that's why I'm going to do this preview and probably going forward, you know, most of these previews a little bit different, as nobody, I don't think, wants to sit there and listen to me do a full, you know, boring and just all serious game preview, shall we say, about a 2-7 football team. I just don't think anyone wants to watch that. So instead, I'm gonna try and do it in a different way. Maybe a little bit more funner, shall we say, as you can, talking about a 2-7 football team. But instead, I'm gonna, instead of just doing this is what I think about the game, these are the matchups, blah 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 blah. I'll talk 3 things that the Browns can have success and maybe win in the game. 3 ways that they can lose, of course, and obviously things that they will struggle with, and then just finish it off with three of the biggest questions I think we'll be asking about this game, obviously during and after. So let's jump straight into it, and I'll start with 3 ways to win. Let's start with the positive, or shall I say 3 ways to have success, and maybe win, because even if the Browns do all of these things, as we've seen with the Cleveland Browns, they still might lose the game. So 3 ways to have success against the Baltimore Ravens this week. Number 1, play like an actual NFL offense. I'm not asking for much. I'm not asking for the greatest show on turf, grass this week. But, just actually looking like an NFL offense will go pretty far in this game. Now, the Ravens defense has been pretty bad this year. Now, don't get me wrong, that is partly, maybe massively, due to the whole unit being injured for most of the year. But they still have been pretty bad. They have not been great by any means. They've actually given up more points than they've scored, and that's saying something because they are averaging quite a lot of points. I think they average 25 points a game, so to still be giving up more points than obviously you are scoring is not great. They rank 26th in passing defense. They rank 20th in rushing defense. Just to give you an idea, they give up a lot of yards, and just to give you an idea on how many yards they have given up, this is their games this year and the yards that they've given up. 497 against the Bills. They even gave up 322 in that first game against us. 426 against the Lions. 382 against the Chiefs. 417 against the Texans. 241 against the Rams, so a much better game from them, but they actually lost that game. They only scored 3 points in that game. Shout out to Cooper Rush, I believe it was. 372 to the Chicago Bears, 332 to the Miami Dolphins, and 365 to the Minnesota Vikings. So only 2 games this year where they have not given up over... No, 1 game this year where they have not given up over 300 yards on defense. So, as I said, they have been pretty bad this year. Of course, a lot of that is to do with the injuries that they've had. But even this week, they've obviously gotten a lot of those players back, and obviously that's why they're on this 3-game winning streak. But they do have a couple of guys out this week on that defensive side of the ball. Jay Higgins, linebacker, is out. As well as Marlon Humphrey, obviously cornerback, he is out for this game, and Mike Green is actually questionable for this game as well after not practicing, so looking like it's trending towards him not playing as well. They are really bad against the pass this year, so as I said, 28th in passing defense, so if Dylan wants to somewhat save his stripes, then obviously this is going to be a game to do that. Any success the Browns can have in the passing game, of course, hinders on their run game, just the nature of the offense that they run. And, of course, the run game has struggled the last few weeks. The Ravens are better against the run than they have been against the pass, but they aren't great. Obviously, 20th in rushing defense this year. And, so the Browns have to get clinched on. They have to get the run game going in this game. Establish the run, set up the passing game, whether that's through the tight ends, whatever. Anything you can do to set up that passing game, and then obviously actually try and challenge this team vertically, with those outside receivers. Hopefully Tillman can have a game in this game. And obviously and as I said, just look like an NFL offense. I mean, I'm not asking for much. I'm not asking for Dylan to throw for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. I'm not asking for Quinshon Judkins to go for 250 and 3 touchdowns. Just look like an NFL offense. Have a competent run game, a competent passing game where you are actually attacking, more than just within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, actually attacking the ball downfield, just at least some concepts that we see every other NFL team run. And this offense should have some success against this Ravens defense, because as I said, this Ravens defense is not great at all. They have not been great all year. A lot of that's been because of the injuries, but even without the injuries, they've not been great. The secondary has been banged up. Jair Alexander has got traded and then retired, so they're still dealing with those issues in the secondary. If the Browns can actually, as I said, operate like a real NFL offense, then that's going to go a long way to them having any success in this game. Number two, now, whilst it doesn't matter what the defense does any given week, if the offense is non-existent, as we have seen most weeks, on the flip side, it also doesn't matter what the offense does if the defense doesn't show up. If one week the offense actually decides to have a great game, but the defense doesn't, then it doesn't really matter. So they are playing at home this week, so we should get a better performance than, of course, what we've seen from these away performances from the Browns defense. Continue to be, they're unable to brush off the whole home versus away stuff. I mean, it's actually kind of insane when you look at the splits between home and away for this defense, giving up like 11 points at home and 33 points on the road. It truly is actually insane. But this game, of course, starts with stopping the run, as it does any time you play against the Baltimore Ravens. Even with the struggles that they've had this year, they still rank top 5 in rushing yards, as they seem to do every single year, and that's even despite the somewhat down year from Derrick Henry. The Browns defense started the year with one of the best run defenses in the NFL, but that has somewhat faltered, due to some of their away performances, shall we say, over the last few weeks. Obviously giving up quite a lot of chump plays in the run game. They've obviously dropped down in their run defense and where they stack up in the rest of the NFL. So, have to get back to playing good run defense in this game. Even when they were playing well, even earlier in the start of the year, they still struggled against misdirection, wide zone concepts. They still continue to struggle against that. Thankfully, Henry doesn't run that much misdirection, obviously being a 6'4" guy that tends to go north to south. However, Lamar Jackson is pretty much the misdirection king at quarterback when it comes to those RPOs. So they have to be on their game. Carson Schlesinger could be in for a big game trying to cover Lamar. Obviously, both cover Lamar in coverage, and obviously Lamar any times that he runs. So could be a big game for Carson Schlesinger's Rookie of the Year campaign in this week against the Ravens. And then on the flip side, after throwing for the most yards of his career last year, the Ravens ranked 28th in passing yards this season. Obviously, not having Lamar for 3 games doesn't help. And obviously, Cooper Rush in there is obviously not going to help. But they've really struggled to get much going through the air this year. Outside of Zay Flowers, no Ravens player, whether that's receiver, tight end, running back, has more than 250 yards receiving. And although he hasn't been great, shall we say, as I said, he doesn't even have 200 yards receiving in 9 games this year. But Rashad Bateman is also out for this game as well. So if the Browns can play good run defense and keep this inconsistent Ravens passing attack, in check, then they'll have a chance to limit this Ravens offense. And of course, pair that with hopefully somewhat operating like an NFL offense, and that will go a long way to at least keeping this game close, at least being competitive in this game, and then maybe, pulling out a win in this game as well. And then number 3, which might sound silly after just talking about their offense, but stop Lamar Jackson. Whilst I can talk about the Ravens offense, as I just did, Lamar is basically an offense within himself. He's that good of a quarterback that he deserves this one section by himself. I'm a big Lamar guy, have been for a long time. Absolutely hate the fact that he plays for the Baltimore Ravens. A little bit of lore about me. First ever draft where I actually sat down, looked at quarterback prospects and attempted to rank them in my own kind of, ranking of which guys I think top to bottom, whatever. Obviously 2018 with the Browns having the number 1 pick. I came out with Lamar Jackson as my number one quarterback that year, probably because I had no idea what I was doing and I was more relying on the highlights than I was anything else and had no idea how to evaluate a quarterback. But that just goes to show you that even when you do know what you're doing, sometimes you don't know what you're doing because, I don't think many people would push back saying that Lamar Jackson nowadays was the best quarterback from that draft. Obviously, it's a tie between him and Josh Allen, but I say all of that to say that I am a massive, massive Lamar Jackson fan. I just absolutely despise the fact that he plays for the Baltimore Ravens. But this guy is just so fucking good. Like, it is just so good. The amount of times I've had to watch my team play this guy, and it doesn't matter. You can do absolutely everything right, and he will just still somehow find a way to beat you, whether it's with his arm, whether it's with his legs. He will find a way to beat you. He's gotten the running back stuff all of those years. Maybe early on it was a little bit somewhat you could understand where he got it from, but this is a guy that has the highest passer rating in NFL history, has the highest average yards, air yards per attempt in NFL history. He can throw the ball. That is for sure. He has put on throwing clinics in his time in the NFL. He's just an unbelievable quarterback. And as I said, this year, obviously with the injury, struggled early on. He's 3-3 as a starter this year. But, as I said, the passing game as a whole, not because of Lamar, in my opinion, just because of obviously the rest of the kind of roster, etc., and the personnel has not been great. But Lamar himself has been, 70% of his passes he's completing, 1,250 yards in 6 games, 15 touchdowns to just 1 interception, and leading the NFL in air yards per attempt and quarterback rating as well, with 127.1 quarterback rating, which I believe would be the highest in NFL history for a season. Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He is a borderline generational type player. It doesn't matter if the Browns do everything that I just said about defense, do everything that I just said about offense. Sometimes guys are so good that it doesn't even matter. And Lamar Jackson is one of those guys. So if the Browns want any chance of winning this game, then they better hope that Lamar Jackson just decides to not have one of those games and do their best job to keep him in check as much as they can, because he is that good and he deserves that level of respect. Now, 3 ways for the Browns to lose. Now, this was hard, trying to narrow this down to 3 ways, because there's probably 150 ways that the Browns can lose this game. But to talk about the most glaring, most obvious to me, obviously outside of just being the Browns, number 1, turnovers. You look at the last Ravens game, that was a somewhat close game. And then obviously a string of turnovers just took that game completely out of reach. So if the Browns want any chance to stay in this game, keep this a competitive game, they have to limit the turnovers. They have to play clean football. That is obviously going to go a long way for this team, because, when you are a bad team like the Browns, you just can't afford to be turning the ball over as much as they are. The Ravens rank 15th in turnovers. Their defense ranks 15th in turnovers, about middle of the road. Their offense actually ranks about the same, 14th. So, they're pretty much neutral on the turnover differential this year, actually similar to the Browns, with obviously Dylan Gabriel coming in and turning the ball over a lot less than Joe Flacco was. But in the last couple of weeks with Dylan, we've still seen some turnovers. And obviously, when you're playing the Ravens, you've got to limit the turnovers. You've got to play clean football. I say when you're playing the Ravens, when you're playing any team and you're the Cleveland Browns and you have such a bad offense and you have to rely on everything going right for you to have a chance to win the game, then of course turnovers play such a big role in that. So if the Browns, if it's similar to like the first game with the Ravens and they have a string of a couple of turnovers here and there, the game's going to just get out of hand and they'll have no chance of getting back into the game. So they've got to play as clean football as they can to keep themselves in this game for as long as they can for then all of those other things that I talked about, that they can have success in, for those to actually matter and to actually contribute to those successes, because it doesn't matter if they do all of those things if they then just go throw 2 pick sixes and completely ruin everything they've just done to get up to that point. So turnovers, got to keep them down, got to limit the turnovers, got to play clean football. Number 2, special teams disasters. Again, it's the same as turnovers, I suppose, although they technically don't count as turnovers when they're on special teams, and obviously a return is not a turnover, etc., etc. But the same applies as it does with the turnovers. It doesn't matter if you do all of those things that I said, that can contribute to successes in this game. Doesn't matter that if we get the run game going and Dylan can connect with a few of those receivers and we can score a couple of touchdowns, whatever. It doesn't matter if the defense plays great and we hold Lamar Jackson in check and we hold this Ravens offense in whole in check like we did in the first game. I mean, the first game, Derrick Henry had 23 fucking rushing yards and we got blown out because of the turnovers. And the same applies with the special team disasters. I mean, you look at last week's game, Justin Fields threw 11 passes, guys. 11 pass attempts. He completed 6 of them. And the Browns lost that game to the Jets because of the special teams disasters, because they just decided to spot the Jets 14 points back to back for no fucking reason. So it all kind of combines together, but of course they are technically different. But, as I said, the clean football with the turnovers and the special teams disaster, it doesn't matter what you do as a team, how much success you can have in other areas. If your special teams are going to just shit the bed and give up 2 touchdowns every game, you're going to lose every game. And that's the same in this game. You're going up against a Ravens team who always have good special teams, just because their head coach was a special teams guy. They've always had competent special teams. They're going to give you competent special teams. That's what they do. If the Browns are unable to do that, if they're going to just have more special teams disasters, then we all know how this game is going to end, and it's not going to look pretty, and it's going to be a blowout. So turnovers, special teams disasters. When you play the Jets and that happens, you lose. That's the fucking Jets, one of the worst teams in the NFL. What do you think is going to happen if you do that against the Ravens, who, yes, the record might not suggest so, but it is one of the stronger rosters in the NFL? They're going to just blow you out, and that's what will happen. So the Browns have to play clean football, and they have to limit the special teams disasters. And then finally, the final way they can lose this game, I'm going to be honest, just get outclassed. Let's be real, guys. The Ravens are a better football team. I spoke about it earlier. The Ravens are a better football team than the Cleveland Browns. There is no reason why the Ravens don't just come into this game and just completely outclass the Cleveland Browns and beat them fair and square, as better teams do beat worse teams. There is quite a high chance of that happening. So, it might sound like a cop-out. It might sound like I'm being lazy here. But in the end of the day, as I said, this is the Baltimore Ravens. They are a better football team currently than the Cleveland Browns. I say currently, they've been a better football team than the Cleveland Browns for a fucking long time, unfortunately. So that's why they might just come into this game and completely outclass the Cleveland Browns. Lamar Jackson is a slightly better quarterback than Dylan Gabriel, shall we say. I think there's probably mountains in between the gap between those two players. This is just a better football team, as I said, than the Cleveland Browns. So there is just more than enough chance that the Ravens just come in and completely outclass the Browns. We've seen it in recent years. The first game this season, you could maybe argue that wasn't so much the case, because it was more so, as I said, the Browns somewhat kept that game close until obviously the string of turnovers just took that, out of control. Whereas, recent years, we have seen the Ravens just come in here and beat our asses and just be the better team. And there is no reason why that might not happen again this Sunday. And obviously, if that's the case, it's quite easy to understand. They're just a better football team. That's the three things that obviously the Browns can lose this game. As I said, there's a million reasons the Browns can lose this game, but they're the 3 biggest things that I think obviously we would probably identify with a loss in this game. So now, finally, the 3 questions that I think we will be asking ourselves, asking the team, asking our fellow Browns fans during, after this game. Number one, will there be a quarterback change during or after this game? We spoke last week about how the leash is clearly shortening for Dylan. I've got to the point now where I think I've seen enough with Dylan. I'm pretty confident to say that he's not a starting NFL quarterback. So how much more do we need to see from him, of course, is the argument. Whilst I don't necessarily think that a 5th round pick, Shedeur Sanders is going to come in and show you much more, I do still believe that he should be given the chance, and that obviously the Browns should give themselves the chance to evaluate him. So will it happen during the game? I would not be shocked, but I don't think so. I said last week that whilst I was ready for a quarterback change, I don't think throwing Shedeur Sanders out there against this Ravens team that, as I said at the start, is one game out from the division. They are going to be gunning for this one. Even with the injuries on defense, we know what that Ravens defense can do. Is it that wise throwing Shedeur Sanders out there in his first game against this team? I don't think so. But it might get to a point, as I said, that defense is pretty physical. Either Dylan gets knocked out of this game, and Shedeur comes in by virtue of that, or that Dylan is struggling so much and it gets so bad that you've got to bring Shedeur in at the end of this game. Whether or not that happens, as I said, I would not be surprised. But in terms of next week, going up against the Raiders, I think that's when all of us are going to be identifying the point where they make the change. I said last week, and I still think now, unless Dylan has a great game, I mean a great game, I just don't see any reason to justify not making the change. And I think a lot of people feel the same. So I think that's going to be the biggest question during and after this game is obviously, will Dylan survive this whole game? If he does, did he play well? If not, is it Shedeur Sanders' time? Is it time to get the wrists up against the Raiders next week? I think that's going to be the biggest question that we're all going to be asking ourselves, with this game. Number two, are they tanking? Now, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but, the Browns have split with the Ravens, as I mentioned, each of the last 3 seasons. They always seem to play them tough for at least one of the games of the series. So if we see this team go out there this week, especially at home, and, look like they're not even trying, then I think it would be quite safe to say that they're tanking. Now, again, tongue-in-cheek, I don't actually believe that teams tank. Let me change that. Players don't tank. Obviously, teams can make decisions that are not exactly conducive to winning, and that's how I view it. I don't think no team goes into a game and goes, right, we're losing this game. It's more so just, as I said, teams will make decisions that are not exactly conducive to winning games throughout the year that, of course, they hope will contribute to maybe stacking up some losses. The Browns went into this season, pretty much everyone knew, as a rebuild type transition year. We can sit here and argue about that and go back and forth about that all day, but to do so is to just ignore what we all spoke about during the offseason. In my opinion, even the owner himself practically said that this is something they're going to be patient with, and obviously it's longer than just a 1-year process. So none of us went into this year thinking that they weren't trying to be compete for a Super Bowl, etc. But that doesn't mean that they would go into the year tanking. I've always said that you should never go into any season with the idea of tanking and losing as many games as you can, because I just think the losing culture that it builds overrides any potential rewards that you can get by the end of it. We've seen so many teams tank, get good players, and it not equal anything because they've just built such a losing culture. You look at all of the best teams in the NFL the last couple of decades, they're not teams that tank. But with all of that being said, if you get to a point, as I always say, where you are 2-7, 2-8, 2-9, whatever, your season is pretty much over anyway. What is the difference between losing 2 games and 4 games? Not really any, but the draft difference is quite big. So I think, obviously, as I said, some of it is tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, I do like to have a laugh with this stuff. I will admit that. You look at my Twitter, a lot of it is obviously satire. A lot of it is tongue-in-cheek when it comes to this tanking stuff. But it is a serious question that people will be asking if the performances continue to be as bad as they are, and then even with it being tongue-in-cheek, just to have any accusations of tanking laid against you just shows you how bad of a team that you are and how bad these performances are. So, as I said, we get another one of those against the Ravens, even though we've played pretty well against them in recent years, have split the series in recent years. Then I think a few of us might be more on the side of, this team is probably slightly tanking, but we'll have to wait and see. And then finally, obviously, maybe the biggest question outside of the quarterback, will Kevin Stefanski be fired with a loss in this game? Short answer, no. He will not be fired if the Cleveland Browns lose this game. I do not believe that he will be fired even if the Cleveland Browns lose every single game here on out. And that's because I just don't believe that they're going to fire him in season. And I personally think that is the right thing to do. I see absolutely 0 point in firing the coach now. This is not me saying that they should not fire the coach at all. I've done plenty of videos on this discussion and will continue, I'm sure, to do plenty of videos on this discussion. But what I basically am just talking about here is just whether or not Kevin Stefanski gets fired with a loss in this game as a response to a loss in this game. And that's just not going to be the case. As I said, they're not going to fire him to the end of the season because there is absolutely no point in firing him into the end of the season. The only thing that firing him in the season does is you have to bring in an interim who, is trying to get the job. No one is going to take the interim role and not long-term want the job. You're going to take that interim role and hope that you can do that good of a job that you are considered for the job full time. That is what anyone would do, and you couldn't blame anyone for doing that. So if an interim comes in there, they're going to try and win games. And as I said, when you get to a point where you are 2-7, 2-8, 2-9, whatever, what is the point of winning games? You see what I mean? So all you're actually doing is taking yourself out of a better draft pick in a lost season by bringing in an interim, maybe causing a headache when it comes to the hiring process because you then have to consider the interim because he won two games or something. The interim, if he does get hired, will then be fired a year later because we all know interim head coaches then becoming head coaches never works. So you would just waste another year for a head coach search. And as I said, and all of that to basically win a couple of games and take yourself out of a draft position. If you're going to be bad, be bad. If you're going to bottom out, bottom out. If the coach is the reason you're losing, keep him for the end of the season. Lose as many games as you possibly can. And then fire the coach, bring someone in, bring in a new regime that then can take that draft pick and go do something with it. As I said, there's just absolutely no point in firing the coach in season when your season is lost. Yes, if you've got a first-round rookie draft pick like the Titans did with Cam Ward, and Brian Callahan is literally a detriment to his development, any more weeks under Brian Callahan and it might be too late in his development, that's how bad Brian Callahan is, then yes, I understand firing the coach in the season. If you're a team like, you look at the Ravens the last few weeks, that I would not be shocked if obviously Harbaugh got sacked, and I would have been shocked because it's the Ravens. But in terms of that, that hypothetical, that scenario where you've got a team that's supposed to be good, that is struggling, is obviously in a bit of they need a fresh face in there or whatever, then yes, maybe firing the coach and kind of inserting a bit of energy might save that team's season and they can go use that to make the playoffs, etc., whatever. But when you're a bad team like the Cleveland Browns, there is 0 point firing the coach mid-season. I will never, ever move away from that. I will never, ever stop believing that. And I'm glad that it looks like that's what the Browns will do. I don't even know. I'm still not even 100% sure if Jimmy is going to fire him even at the end of the season. But that is a discussion, obviously, for another day. But regardless of what your thoughts are on that, you don't fire the guy now. I just don't see the point. So if the Browns lose this game, don't expect Kevin Stefanski to be fired. And when he's not fired, don't be angry, because that is the best thing they can do. At this point, if you continue losing games, just continue losing games. Go get the highest draft pick that you can. And then if you want to sack the coach, do it then. Absolutely no point doing it in the season, and I don't think that they will do it. But that is the 3 questions that I have, and I think everyone will be asking from this game. That was the 3 reasons out of the 1 million reasons why the Browns can lose this game, and that was also the 3 ways in which the Browns can have some success, maybe, that could potentially contribute to the Browns winning this game. Which, if they do win this game, how many people are going to be happy about it? I don't think half of the fan base will be. As I said, 3-7, 2-8. What is the difference? Not too much. But for me, even when I say, you get towards the end of the year and what is the point of winning these games, etc., etc. I can say all of that, but when I sit down on a Sunday on my sofa and I've got the game on the TV, it's still hard for me to root for the team to lose. I'm always, when I'm watching the game, going to root for the team to win, especially when I'm playing against the Baltimore Ravens. I say obviously I'm not actually a part of the team as much as I wish that I was. But obviously, you still want to win that game when you're playing the Ravens in the moment. So, of course, that is what I am going to be cheering for. But when you are a bad team and you are, of course, got one eye, looming on the draft, etc., etc., it does make the losses not quite as bad as obviously when you are a good team and you've got higher expectations. But as I said, playing against the Ravens, when I sit down there and watch it, I still want to win that game. And obviously, let's see if the Browns can do that. They've split with them, the last 3 seasons. They lost the first game this year, so another loss, in this game will obviously end that streak of splitting with them. So obviously, we'll see how it ends up. The Browns are a bad football team. The Ravens are a good football team. Should be pretty easy to figure out how this one should go. Should probably not have taken me 37 minutes to get to here. I'm kidding, because this is the NFL. You never know. The Browns are -7.5 favourites in this game. Sorry, underdogs in this game. Favourites, lol. So obviously no one is really expecting this team to win. But as I said, it's the NFL. You never know. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this game. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on, what things do you think we're going to be talking about? Is it the quarterback change? Is it obviously, some of the players apparently texting some Cleveland members of the media that don't even have their number, telling them that they want the quarterback change? Who knows? But that might even be a video in itself. I'll leave that for you guys to think about. But as I said, that will do it for me today, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like. Hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy, because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing weekend. Enjoy this game as much as you can. Enjoy all of the college football this weekend. All of the quarterback watching this weekend in college football. But most importantly, as always, go Browns.